Hello and welcome back, everyone, to the Ground and Root podcast. I'm your host and holistic cancer dietitian, Deonda Traz. I'm super excited to be with you today. We have a special guest. So, as some of you know, if you have been following along, one of my goals with this show is to share real stories, not just to share theories and ideas and my beliefs about things, but to really showcase people who have put many of these principles into practice as they moved either through their cancer journey or after their cancer journey. And so you can hear from real people what it means to actually use these strategies in their life. I think this is very important to show you that it can be done and that hopefully it will inspire you to do the same. So today you are going to meet Brandon Weaver. I'm really excited to have him here. You're going to hear more about his journey and some of the things that he's been doing to help himself stay healthy and cancer-free. This month, we are showcasing, if you've listened to any of the previous episodes for this month, it's been all about detox support, right? We've been talking about how to reduce your toxic load, how to enhance your detox pathways. And Brandon is a perfect example for this topic because he really took a lot of these ideas to heart. You're going to hear all about it. I've had the pleasure of knowing Brandon. Gosh, I realize it's been almost 5 years. I think it has been five
Yeah.
years this month, Brandon. So he joined us inside of our group when we first launched it, and he's been here all the way through. And I just feel so fortunate to have you here today. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's funny because this is like a role reversal for me because I'm usually the one asking you all the questions in the calls.
That's right. That's true. This time I get to ask you questions. Actually, that
Yeah.
I like that. That's fun. Why don't we start with your story? I've known you for 5 years, but your story with cancer started before that. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. And it was the moment, it was looking back on it, it was sudden, at least looking back on it 5 years now. So I was diagnosed in August of 2020. I was testicular cancer stage 1B. And thinking back to those couple days, it was hard to ignore that something was different or something was wrong because there was a large mass
Mhm.
and it was 2 to 3 times of what it should be. And so obviously, you kind of panic and freak out in the moment. You're like, what do I do? I got to talk to my doctor or something. And at the time, of course, I didn't have a urologist. I just had a primary care doctor. So I emailed him at first sign of it one night and then had a really quick impromptu visit the next morning. And it was actually my primary care doctor, my normal one was actually on like paternity leave or something at the time. So I actually had a fill-in doctor. And so I wasn't used to him. And so he was just like, yeah, I think you might have testicular cancer. There was really like, because I wasn't used to his mannerisms, there was like no bedside manner, like dancing around it. He just came out right and said it. And so before I even left that appointment, a urologist at Kaiser in a separate department, of course, already had left me a voicemail because they had already communicated or something. So within 30 minutes, I already had a follow-up appointment with the urologist to confirm it. And so I met with him that same day, and he basically said, "Yeah, I already booked you for surgery as well 3 days later." So everything moved within 4 days between like me noticing something and getting it taken care of essentially. And so it was like a Wednesday night when I first sent that email, and then the following Tuesday morning, I had the surgery. So it was that
Wow.
quick. And it was crazy because, like I said, it was hard to ignore, and everything just snowballed from there. I'm glad it was that quick because if I had too much time to think about it, who knows what would have happened. I could have
Mhm.
delayed the surgery a little bit, or, I don't know. I just, it's something I didn't really want to think about. So I was glad to have the surgery as quick as it did.
And I'm guessing because of the size of the mass, they just right away were like, we have to get it out. We're not bothering with other testing or biopsy or anything like this. It was just that was the first kind of treatment plan.
Yeah. And it was really, I'm sure I probably had some sort of input on it, but the whole thing was new to me because
Hmm.
of course, it had never happened before. Of course, my only knowledge at that point with testicular cancer was the whole Lance Armstrong story, and that was 20
Hmm.
plus years ago.
Hmm.
Everybody heard about that because of Livestrong. That was my only like knowledge, if you want to call it that, around the subject. So I didn't know what treatment might entail or how long it might be or what surgery would be, all these different things. Like I didn't have time to think about it. So that was my only reference. And when they said surgery, I was like, okay, sounds good.
Hmm.
probably know what they're talking about, so I'm going to follow their lead. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So what happened after surgery? Was there follow-up? Was there any talk of needing additional treatment or what happened next?
Fortunately, they caught it early enough where it was stage 1B. It was very localized. So surgery was it. I'm on a surveillance plan. And so I
Hmm.
never had any follow-up, no chemotherapy, no radiation, nothing
Hmm.
like that. It's really just been surveillance because post-surgery, first, my blood markers were elevated, which I guess is natural for that kind of thing. So they wanted to see, they were testing me once a week post-surgery to see what the blood markers were going to do. They were pretty confident they would go back to their normal levels. There's three different
Hmm.
markers. And if they didn't normalize after 2 weeks, then they would reevaluate and see if they need to do anything. But fortunately, they did. So at that point, my urologist in Northern California basically said, at this point, the guidelines from the Testicular Cancer Foundation or just the
Hmm.
recommendations from everyone around the world is to just do surveillance. And what that meant at the time was blood markers, chest X-ray, MRI, or CT scan. And the intervals with those change over the years. The further you get
Hmm.
away from surgery, the less it happens.
Hmm.
And so I forget what it was in the beginning. It was probably every 2 or 3 weeks they would take blood tests, and then the MRI, X-ray was probably 3 to 6 months, something like that. But now, fast forward 5 years, this coming August will be 6 years. So at this point, it's really just annual. It's annual blood markers, annual MRI, annual chest X-ray. So
Okay.
I've really just been on surveillance ever since August 2020.
Yeah. And there's been no sign of any even hint of a recurrence, correct?
And so just knowing my personality, as you might know, like I'm very diligent on these kind of things. And so as I'll go into the topic today, but it was really just like a diligence is probably the best word because I was adamant about doing whatever I could to prevent recurrence. And so
Hmm.
doing the self check. So that they
Hmm.
always recommend, in with this kind of cancer, they recommend you do once a month, you do a self check. So just feel for any lumps, any pain, anything like that. But because it's me, I basically do it every time I shower. So for that, there's never been any signs. But also when I go to my urologist check-ins, when he does his exam, what he'll do is he'll poke my chest, different areas, and he'll also do the collarbone and like the lymph nodes in the neck and everything because
Hmm.
those are common spots, he said, where something may present itself later.
Hmm.
And ever since my first appointment with him and I see him do that, I do that too. So it just, even though the recommendation is just to do the once a month check,
Yeah.
because I've seen the experts do what they do, why can't I do it too? So that's what I
Right.
do.
I love that. Yeah, of course you do that. That's good. That's great. Okay, I know. So this happened in August of 2020, and then I met you in March of 2021. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about like between that time span, what was going on for you? Obviously, you must have been very shocked. You're a young man still. So how old
Yeah.
were you when you were diagnosed?
2020, I was 36.
Yeah. So shocking to be like, what? So tell me what was going through your head after that. So you have a surveillance plan, but what else were you either researching or was top of mind for what do I do now?
You have your friends and family as a support group, but sometimes because they're not experiencing the emotional roller coaster of it all and just everything that comes along with it, that sometimes they're not the best support group for you because they don't know the questions to ask or they don't know what to ask or these kind of
Hmm.
things. And so I started joining a support group through UCSF. And that was, I think it was November or December of that year. So a couple months afterward. And I still attend it almost every month or biweekly at this point too, as well. But the lead of that group, she saw you speak at a UCSF conference, you know, shortly before that or something like that. And
Okay.
so she gave me your name as a reference or your website or something like that. And so that's when I reached out and you had just were in the beginning stages of developing the program. And so
Hmm.
that's how you and I got introduced.
Okay. So I'm curious though, okay, if you were interested in coming to work with me, you must have already had a sense that there was more you could explore or do to help yourself stay healthy and cancer free. So had you already started to do some of your own research before we started to come up with a game plan together?
A little bit, but it was mostly because I didn't know what to look for.
Hmm.
The stuff that I have already implemented today is, it didn't even cross my mind back in 2020 or 21.
Okay.
Some of the things that I was just going down the rabbit hole of what else could I take away? What else could I change in those things? And that's how, it started with the food intake, of course, because nutrition program and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
then again, you go down that rabbit hole of non-toxic cleaning products and pans and clothing and all the air filter, all these different things. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how it started.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and talk about that? Let's talk about all that because I know you've made so many changes. And I would love for you to just share exactly like you just said. So, starting with food, what were some of the things that were top of mind for you that, like, oh, I need to do this differently? And even maybe even comment because it has been 5 years since you've made many of these changes. Are you still doing it exactly the same as you were then, or has it sort of modified a bit to be more of a long-term game plan for you? Just let's start with just the food part. What does that look like?
So I remember emailing you even before I joined the program just to gauge the information that you'd be willing to
Mm-hmm.
share at that point. And I would send you like here's some typical things that I would eat during the week type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask you like something along the lines of like, how healthy is this? Or what is this okay to eat type thing? And it would be like, chicken nuggets or like Trader Joe's teriyaki chicken, those kind of things. The convenient, easy type of foods to make.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, I don't know that you actually answered the question directly because your responses were more like educating me for me to make the answer for myself, which was good because it opened my mind to what else can I learn, what else can I research, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So the food part of it was learning about the EWG, the Environmental Working Group, the Dirty Dozen Clean 15. So once a
Mm-hmm.
year, I think it's around April or something, they always release
Soon.
this study
Yep.
about the fruits and vegetables, the dirtiest dozen and the cleanest 15. So everything, papayas, avocados, bell peppers, onions, basically the most common fruits and vegetables that people would eat. They're
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be on one of these lists. And I checked it for the first couple of years pretty regularly, and they stay the same from what I remember for the most part. So that was the first part, was just learning about the Dirty Dozen Clean 15 and starting to buy basically most things organic.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, living in California, we have a lot of options for organic food. Trader
Mm-hmm.
Joe's, Safeway, Vaughn's, you name it. It's hard not to find organic food, farmers markets. So that was
Mm-hmm.
like my foray into the whole organic food area.
Were there any other parts of your diet that you had to adjust? It's funny because I don't remember those initial emails, but hearing you, say chicken nuggets, I'm sure I must have commented on that at some point and be like, maybe we need to move towards the whole chicken instead of the processed version. So,
Yes,
what else
yeah.
have you modified?
It's just, yeah. So the organic label is easy for a lot of people nowadays to understand because it's right in the package or in the supermarket, a big stand for it. But reading product labels really matters too because sometimes the marketing on the package doesn't tell the full story. So it might say organic something on the front, but look in the back, there's 26 added grams of sugar. So it's like, how
Mm-hmm.
healthy is that thing really? It might be organic olive oil, but whatever else is inside might be not as great for you. So that was part of, and so another part of it is diabetes runs in my family history. And so I was already reading product labels, nutrition labels, in terms of the added sugar part of it, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really looking at the full ingredients because I think this is still true, but the way that things are listed on the package is the quantity of the ratio based on what it's in the package. So if sugar is the first or second thing, it's the most prominent ingredient in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I never looked at those details that closely before because there's a lot of things that are labeled sugar, like molasses and honey and sucrose, all these different things. So like just knowing, having been educated on that kind of stuff, then you realize, yeah, might be organic popcorn, but what else is inside type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really being diligent on knowing everything that's in the product you're eating.
Yeah. And I mean, that alone, right? Even just those two steps of trying to eat more, like trying to eat food more in its whole form. So the less processed version, the least amount of ingredients possible,
Right.
plus choosing as much organic as you can. I mean, that already is shifting your toxic load and like the environment in your body. What else did you bring in food wise before we move to anything else that was maybe different than you were doing before?
Yeah, so there's the food part of it. So I was never vegetarian or vegan or anything like that. So I was eating beef. I was being basically eating chicken, beef, pork, all those things, so fish. And so I kind of switched to wild caught fish. So
Mhm.
wild caught salmon. And generally you can, again, because we live in California, the luxury of finding these kind of specific foods is easier.
It's
But
easier. Yeah.
at Costco, for example, you can find wild caught fish, wild caught halibut, and all these different things. And so wild caught fish, and then you educated me on grass fed and grass finished beef,
Mm.
because again, something might say grass fed, but it might be grain finished. And so that's like halfway, but
Hmm.
having it grass finished as well is, from what I know, is better. And that limits your choices, of course, because you're getting more specific. But that was part of the beef part of it. Just, I don't know if this is your term or not, but eat the rainbow every day.
Yeah.
So every single, like many colors on your plate. So blueberries, mango, get the reds, greens, yellows, every single color of the rainbow if
Hmm.
you can throughout the day or in a single meal, because the color of the food, there's different like phytonutrients, I think, or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm using that correctly, but
No,
like
you are.
there's
Actually, this is great,
there's a
Brandon.
reason.
People are seeing firsthand how much you've learned. Like you're clearly one of my best students here. Like you can repeat the things. This is good.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a reason why these things are different colors, because there's different things inside of it, right?
Hmm.
So I've been a lot more conscious of, to this day, what's on my plate. Not just is there fat, carbs, and protein, but what fruit am I eating? Am I eating the same fruit every day? No, I try and vary it up. I'll have a banana today, but then a pear tomorrow, then a
Hmm.
papaya, then just like keep rotate. I don't keep like a daily log of this, but just a mental note of, oh, I had strawberries yesterday. Maybe I'll have blueberries today. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it's different colors, probably different beneficial things. That's my general thought process.
Yeah, it's great.
So eating the rainbow. Another one is like the seed oils. And I'm sure a lot of
Hmm.
people see the social media posts nowadays on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. But safflower oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, all these seed oils. It's not a secret anymore. Like these things aren't really good for you. So stick to coconut, avocado, olive oil. Those are the three better ones that I've stuck to.
Hmm.
Organic is even better, of course. It's just less toxic load on your body. Your body processes it better, I think. So that's another big one. And like I mentioned before, like the sugar intake, it's crazy how a little thing like a granola bar, how much sugar can be added to it,
Hmm.
because 12, 15 grams, or a can of soda is like 30 or 40, or
Hmm.
Starbucks drinks for two. So
Hmm.
just being mindful of that kind of thing. And, I was drinking soda before all this happened, but not that much, maybe 3, 4 times a week, like one a day type thing. I don't, I think I've had maybe one soda in like the past 6 years. So just as an example of something else I've taken out, because I don't miss it, because I know like looking at the color of Pepsi or Coke, probably
Yeah.
not, just probably not good for your body, right?
Yeah.
So just again, going down the rabbit hole of what I've learned, oh, I can take that out. I'm not going to miss it. And I haven't. So I just keep, now that I have such a routine,
Yeah.
all these things are just being replaced by something else or just taken out completely.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything that was actually hard to do or is still hard to do? Anything that you miss from before? Or does this just feel, I don't know, just a happier normal for you?
I have a sweet tooth and I still do. So limiting sweets or like finding good alternatives, like chocolate chip cookies is my vice. It's like the biggest thing that I miss.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's hard to make chocolate chip cookies without sweetener, right? Because then it wouldn't be a chocolate chip cookie.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's one big thing I miss. But on occasion, like Thanksgiving or Christmas, I might have one or two, like the
Hmm.
store-bought ones. If I make them, I try and find something alternative, maybe coconut sugar, or not putting as much. And that's another thing. Like when you're making your own stuff, you can modify recipes. If it
Hmm.
calls for like half a cup of honey, probably too much. Could you get away with a quarter cup of honey? Could you get away with less? Like it's all depending on your taste buds, of course, but you can still eat these kind of things on occasion. But even then, if you're making it yourself and you know what's going into it, modify the recipe, put less of something in and see how it is, because then that could be your recipe going forward.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. So you've definitely made a lot of food shifts over this time. What are some other big changes that you made? And maybe not all at once, as you learned and tackled different areas, maybe after you felt like pretty solid with your food, where did you go next?
Pretty closely to that is just the cookware. Like many other people, I had nonstick pans because the convenience of washing pans that are things will just slide off. There's a reason why they're nonstick because there's a chemical on the surface of it. Like, looking back on it, it's common sense now to me that there's a reason why it's easier to clean because it's probably not beneficial to the body. So I pretty quickly switched to stainless steel pans. There's other recommendations out there, of course. What's the griddle? I'm blanking on the type of it.
Like a cast
Uh,
iron?
Cast iron, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that being a good recommendation too, but
Hmm.
I actually found that like less less appealing just because it's hard for me to imagine leaving whatever you're cooking on that would be your nonstick surface going forward, not really washing it
Right.
completely. So to me,
Right.
that's always been weird. So I've always just stuck to stainless steel pans, and so even like we don't have any steel nonstick pans in our house. Everything is stainless steel. That goes with the frying pans, the pots, the
Hmm.
basically everything. So yeah, that and the changing of the food from basically conventional to organic, and like
Hmm.
this switch from nonstick to stainless steel, it was pretty close to like overnight switch. It was like there was no question I was going to do this. It was just pretty
Okay.
quick. So there was no like
It
delay
wasn't
or like
gradual. You're just like,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
changing.
yeah.
Okay.
So that was the biggest thing. And then other things non-food related we can talk about, of course, but
Yeah.
those things are and even some other utensils like food grade silicone. There's a lot of silicone things out there, but is it food grade? And
Mm.
you can look for those kind of certifications, the stirring spoons and those kind of things. Like
Hmm.
there's there's ways to tell if it's real silicone or not. Again, just going down the rabbit hole of whether it be Reddit or YouTube or whatever, just searching what are some brands to look for, where can I find it, what's a better
Hmm.
alternative, all these things.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. So we're continuing on your sort of recreating this non-toxic lifestyle for you or as best you can. Obviously, we can't control for everything, but you know what, with what's reasonable. What else did you tackle or research or change?
I think that was pretty closely after that was water filter and air filter. People drink water every day, so again, something you're going to be doing regularly forever. So looking into the best water filters, and so this is a very kind of subjective thing with a lot of people online. But there's those like Brita pitchers, those tabletop
Hmm.
pitchers. Like if you're
Hmm.
just pouring water in and it filters out like instantly,
Hmm.
is it really working that type of thing? There's a reason probably it's $10 or $15 for the pitcher because it's probably not
Hmm.
the best one on the market.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and I know that these things aren't really applicable to everybody because budget comes into concern.
Yeah.
But when I was looking at different things, I think it's the Berkey filter is a good one. But what I
Hmm.
use is Hydrovive. Hydrovive it's actually a Shark Tank product from way back in the day, but it's an underwater sink filter. They also have them, you can attach them to your shower head because again, you're fully engulfed by the water in the shower. So what
Yeah.
are you breathing from the water, right?
Yep.
But they have filters for the fridge as well. But that was one that I've used for about 5 years now is this Hydrovive water filter. And what they do is they've done studies about how the quality of their filter compared to everything else on the market. And so that's what convinced me that they were the brand that I wanted to go with because they actually had scientific proof
Hmm.
comparison across different things. So that was the water filter. Then I
And
went
did
to
you
the
put
air
it on
filter.
your shower too?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
The next thing was the air filter, and just looking at the market and everything, what options were available. I went with the Air Doctor, and they have different sizes for how big your space is and everything. We have three at this point. We started out with one because we were living in a smaller apartment at the time, but now we have a bigger house, so the common areas warrant their own filter. So that
Mm-hmm.
was one. And what's good about the Air Doctor is, again, they have these studies that they've compared the quality of their product in removing the allergens in the air. But they also, what's good is they run frequent promotions. It can be an expensive filter, but a lot of times they run significant discounts. So just watch out for one of those discounts, and you won't find a better deal type thing.
Nice.
I took advantage of those. So those are the two other big things because the air you breathe, whether it's in the house or
Yeah.
outside, you can't have it outside, of course. It's much harder, but so the air and water filter for sure.
Yeah, I think too, when you prioritize, because of course this can get really pricey and we've only scratched the surface, right? Of like the things you could invest in. But I think the things that are going to impact you on a daily basis definitely make sense, which is what you're describing. That's what you went for first. Or what are the things I'm exposed to every day? The food I'm eating, the how I'm cooking the food, the water I'm drinking, the air I'm breathing. So if we have to prioritize where to spend our money, that makes sense to me. Anyways, I understand why that you went that approach.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the next thing is like the clothing you're wearing. You don't
Mm,
think, at least I didn't think that that would have an impact because there's so many different fabrics out there nowadays, and there's probably even more fabrics being invented because of certain things or environmental reasons, or people are becoming
mhm,
more conscious of what they're wearing. But
mhm.
I never thought of like organic cotton, like looking for organic cotton in general, or like linen. Like those are two of the better ones you can wear. And so there's a lot of nowadays, I see a lot more products coming available that are, health conscious, environmentally conscious, all these different things, like different certifications. There's got certified, there's Oecotex, there's Blue Sign, and all these different things. And so it's funny because like some of these brands that come out with products there, they say they are, environment or health conscious aware, but then they're still made of like a plastic
A
foundation.
synthetic. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm
Hmm.
like, so I see these like social media posts or like these articles. I'm like, but it's still plastic.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not really doing anything to convince me that it's healthy for me to wear if it's still plastic. You
Hmm.
know. So again, what I learned was like, again, researching all these different brands that you can find of like organic clothing or linen or bamboo. Maybe some bamboo is might be questionable just because again it might be added to using other synthetics, but you know, I found some good organic clothing brands that I just go back to if I need something else. But there's so many different brands now they're offering it, and again, it's going to be more traditionally than something you might buy at Walmart or Costco. But
Right.
you're paying for quality, you're paying for the better conditions that the material was grown in.
So over the last 5 years, have you replaced most of your clothes with, or like, how did you prioritize what to switch out first? Or was it like when you needed to get something new, then you went with an organic option?
Both
Okay.
the main things, not everything in my closet is organic. I will say that, but most of it I
Yeah,
would say
neither
is.
is
And again,
mine. Let's just normalize that.
yeah, for
Neither
sure.
is mine.
But yeah, even though it was a quick transition in terms of once I found this brand called PACT,
Mm.
that's the one I use a lot. Undershirts, boxers, socks, those are like my first ones.
Yeah, the things that
Um,
are closest to the body. That's what I would
right.
recommend, especially with something like testicular cancer. What's close to those areas, we want to limit toxins as much as we can.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think what else there was. I do have some other one-off brands just because I found it on sale or something, and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that could be helpful later type thing. But yeah, it was a combination. So it was all of a sudden, but then gradually over time, oh, that sweatshirt's getting old and ratty. Let me get a new one. Okay, now I'll go to these other brands that I know and get one from
Yeah.
there. And Amazon, of course, they have so many different retailers. They do have a lot of organic options on there, but you really have to know and read the descriptions and even do research outside of that on the actual brand's website to see what's actually in the clothing because Amazon descriptions aren't always going to be totally accurate.
Hmm.
Even though you might have options to search, I wouldn't totally trust it in the end.
Hmm. Okay, this is already a lot. Some people listening might be like, wow, that's really inspiring, right? There's a lot of things to trade out. Was there anything else that you also made changes with?
I'm just looking at my list here. Where do I start? Like personal care and cleaning products, like
Hmm.
toothpaste, lotion, floss. Floss is like one of those overlooked things because it is some sort of plastic, I think, and so traditionally, and so there's a lot of the forever chemicals, the PFAS. I forget what the
Hmm.
actual technical name
Yeah.
is for it, but that's the abbreviated name. But the forever chemicals, there's a lot of those in these personal care products, shampoo, lotion, mouthwash, anything like that. Again, go to the EWG because they have a skincare. It's called Skin Deep, and they
Hmm.
have ratings on everything that you could find probably. And so again, that's where I found some brands of things that I would need to replace, like toothpaste, like
Hmm.
floss. And so that's where I started because you're doing that every single day. So that was one place. the cleaning products, if something is scented, lemon, grapefruit, whatever, honey, like it might be synthetically created. So even if it smells nice, if it's an air freshener or something, it's a chemical, just
Mm-hmm.
like you can make scented things if you want, like with different essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of those out there you can make your own cleaning agent with.
Mm-hmm.
So switching out from a lot of the traditional things like the Dawn, the soft soap brands to what we use now primarily is like Castile soap, which is very potent, but that's what I use a lot of times. And then there's other brands for different things that I've again found on EWG, and just you find the retailers that you can find at like Target or maybe Amazon, or
Mm-hmm.
there's other places, but just all these different things that you wouldn't immediately think of. Oh, I need to change that probably because you're just exposed to it. Like when you spray to clean your counters, that mist, it doesn't all go on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it'll stay in the air. And so if it's there and you breathe it, it's like how your risk tolerance, or do you think about those kind of things? And so
Yeah.
the more I can limit the quote bad stuff in my environment in general, the better the more confident I feel that I'm making the right choices. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not just the food, it's not just the water, it's not just the air you breathe. It's all these things that I've changed because I've gone down the rabbit hole of researching everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
And just to be
um,
clear, since other people don't know you who are listening, just to be clear, you were not doing these things before, right? Were any of these things already on your radar before you got your cancer diagnosis?
no, because I was going, when you go to for cleaning products, you buy the 409 from
Yeah,
Target for like the all-purpose cleaner, or
right.
like the Ajax for your bathroom, whatever it is, just because because it works really well, it's really cheap, but there's probably a trade-off on some level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these different things, I wasn't like a lot of people, I was a budget shopper. And
Mm-hmm.
so for a lot of these things, I would again just go for what was on sale, or like buying in bulk because it was a good deal
Mm-hmm.
type thing. So it works really well. But once you learn about things, you find alternatives. Like I mentioned, the Castile soap, the different brands
Mm-hmm.
on EWG and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. So let's go back to what I was mentioning in the beginning of our show, of our episode, that this month we were talking about detox support. So a big portion of this is how, is just like Brandon's been describing, is what are the things we can do to decrease our exposures as what we have control over. But the other part of this is also how do we help ourselves detox better, right? Like, how do we support our pathways to actually clear out whatever we are still exposed to, because it's never going to be 100%, nor does it need to be, as long as we have good. Something I talked about in earlier episodes was that sink diagram, which I know I've used with you before too, Brandon, of just like, the faucet is pouring the toxins in, but if the drain is open and it's not clogged, things will flow out. So I know you've also done some things to try to help enhance your pathways of clearance. So tell us some of what you've done for that.
The biggest, most frequent thing I do is the overnight extended fast. And when people hear the word fast, I think they generally think of, oh, that's just to lose weight, which is
Mm-hmm.
true because if you're limiting the food intake, the calories, it's probably naturally you'll lose some weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not only will you do that, but what I've learned is that the overnight extended fast, or any kind of fast, however long it is, your body gets a chance to clean up after itself. And so in general, I was probably eating 3 meals a day, just standard. And oftentimes I would eat like soon before bed. So it could be 8, 9 o'clock, whatever, eating whatever it was, like a snack or a late night dinner, whatever. And so I wasn't and then I was having breakfast that following morning by 6:30, 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
before work. So that 9 or 10 hours was not enough in my mind for it to clean up, process, digest everything. And so the overnight extended fast right now, what I've worked up to, it's about 15 or 16 hours almost every single night. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'll have dinner about 6:30, 7 o'clock finished. And then I won't even eat breakfast most mornings the following morning. My breakfast, my first meal, is about 11:30 or noon, because
Mm-hmm.
that is about 15, 16 hours. And so what happens is, and everybody's body is differently, I think, but the cleaning up part of it is is when your body goes in and, you know, secretes and finds all the bad stuff so that you can secrete it, whether it's through, urine, stool, sweat,
Mm-hmm.
all the detox pathways. So that's one big thing is the overnight extended fast. But even for a couple of years when I joined your program, I didn't do the 5 day
Mm-hmm.
extended fast. because it seemed too daunting.
Hmm.
And so again, when you hear fast for 5 days, you're like, there's no way I can do that. It is possible. I've done it for probably 3 years straight now, every quarter. So I've probably done it about a dozen times.
Hmm.
But basically, that you're limiting your food intake, of course. But the way I describe it to people is like you're tricking your body that you're in a fasting state, but you're still getting to eat because and the food that the diet that I follow during this plan is the initial program you
Hmm.
came out with. And so there's a variety in there that I like. There's salads, there's soups, there's sweet potato, there's
Hmm.
quinoa, it's colorful things. So you're getting a variety, but you're tricking your body that you're actually in a fasted state so that it can do this autophagy part and clean
Hmm.
up after itself for 3 to 5 days, however long you do the fast. I've always done it for 5 days just to maximize when I actually do it. Because to be honest, it's not a fun process for me because I can eat a lot of food. And so when I'm really limiting my food for that 5 days, it's pretty tough, but I've learned how to, because I've done it for every 3 months, I get used to it. So like when that first day, my body knows, okay, now we're doing it type of thing. And I've just gotten used to it. So the combination of the overnight fast, 15 to 16 hours, plus this 5 days fast 4 times a year, that's one big way that I've done it.
Hmm.
And there's ways you can compound on that fasting. The next thing I'll say is like the infrared sauna. So I'm fortunate to have a local gym about 10 minutes away that I can do an infrared sauna. And so I do that 3 to 4 times a week for about 20 to 30 minutes a session. And again, your body detoxes things in different pathways. Again, urine, stool, sweat, whatever. And so some things get secreted or whatever through sweat, like heavy metals, I think
Hmm.
is one that comes
Yep.
out through sweat.
Hmm.
So like heavy metals in like chocolate. Heavy metal is a common thing found in chocolate. And you probably don't, a lot of people probably don't know that until you actually research it. But again, because I like chocolate or dark chocolate, I know that I might be having some trace of heavy metal in the
Hmm.
chocolate. So
Hmm.
just as an example, I do the infrared sauna, sweat everything out. And so that's another way that I double down on the detox pathways because not everything gets expelled from the body just by going to the bathroom.
I love that. The sauna has been, how long have you been doing that though? I feel like maybe that's the more newer one that you've added in. Is that true? How long has that been?
It's about 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. But for people to know, so you started this process 5 years ago, and there were certain things you just changed right away because they were easy
Yeah.
for you to wrap your head around and a no-brainer for you. And then over time, you've gradually added more and more strategies, right? So it doesn't have to be an overnight thing unless you feel compelled to do that. But
Yeah.
something I really try to emphasize for people is any change you make, even if you just did one of the things that Brandon talked about. Like I said, he is a gold star student. So he's an
Mm.
exception. But even if you just did one or two of those things, it's already going to make a big difference. We're starting to shift the balance. And that's really what we're looking for. And then clearly, the more you can do, the better, as you've done. Is there anything else that you've brought in that we've missed? Like major things like that?
The biggest thing, or the most routine thing I'll say is like my daily smoothie. Smoothie
Mm,
is a very generous word for this because people think of smoothie as like very very sweet type of thing,
yeah.
honey or sugar added, whatever. But my smoothie is not is by no means anything like that. So my smoothie, it's mixed with water, but it's mostly like matcha, moringa powder, cinnamon, mushroom powder, beet powder, all these different, there's probably half a dozen things that I put in there. I drink it most days because again, matcha, you go back to the detox thing, matcha is a great food, whatever drink you want to consume
Hmm.
because it helps with the detox and the autophagy part of it.
Hmm.
Because the chemical that's in green tea is very potent. And so my thought process is if I have this regularly, probably 5 days a week at least or something like that, I'm just doubling down on everything else I'm doing to
Hmm.
prevent something from growing or just feel better in general.
Hmm.
So that's the biggest thing. And again, smoothie is a generous word. It doesn't look appealing, but it's not that bad to me anyway. So again, that's the thing I drink in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that example. I think that if any of you listened to last month's episodes around diet and putting together an anti-cancer diet, one of the things we talked about were some of these, what I would almost consider anti-cancer superfoods, like some heavy hitters that we know have potent anti-cancer properties. And that could be because they're supporting detox, or it could be that they're immune supporting or anti-inflammatory, or even that they have research showing that they target and kill cancer cells. So the concept of how
Yeah.
do we get as many of those in as possible each day? I love, like, your strategy is to have a daily smoothie, like to have a daily drink that just incorporates a lot of those things. So you're not, worried about fitting it into your meals every day. I love that strategy.
Yeah, and one thing else, and I'll circle back on the sauna thing because I was going to the sauna for a while, but then during one of your sessions, you were saying that's great, but there's also binders. So
Mm,
there's different binders you can take, and I don't do all of them, but there's the binders. Basically, by definition, they bind to the bad stuff, so that when
mm,
you sweat it out, it'll have a better chance of getting expelled from the body, right? Whether
mm,
that's through the sauna or like later using the restroom. So the
yeah.
binders I use are psyllium fiber and spirulina. And you generally want to drink those if you're doing the sauna. You generally want to drink those before, so it's in your system, so that it's ready to bind to the things as you're going through the sauna.
Hmm.
So those are the two biggest things the binders that I package up with the sauna part of it. And I know it's infrared saunas. It's more trendy now over the past couple of years because it's gotten so much publicity, but not everybody has access to it or easy access to it.
Yeah.
And some places it can be quite expensive just for one session, like 20-30 bucks a session. But I lucked out with my local sauna because it's close by, but it's also really inexpensive for me.
Mm,
So I can go unlimited times a month for a really good price. So that's another, it's more of an incentive for me because of that as well. But
yeah.
again, I know it's not readily available for everybody listening or watching the call.
Yeah, it's true. But at the same time, I think, like you did, it's also researching what's possible, right? And you may not even know that there's a possibility close by that you could use, take advantage of it. Or maybe instead of a traditional sauna, you use a sauna blanket or other strategies,
Sure.
or it's
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
you save up for because you decide you really want this in your
Totally.
house and you're going to like budget for it. I think there's always ways to make it work. But you're right. You take one thing at a time and you gradually bring in the things that resonate, that you're called to do.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll package on with that is, after you get home from the sauna, you got to shower, right? Because you're all sweaty and stinky. But before I even shower, I do a dry brush because the dry brush
Mm,
it activates the lymph in your body because there's no muscle that's pumping the lymph through your body. It's you are the muscle. So doing a dry brush, I start at the bottom of my feet and work my way up the body. Circular motions I think is best, but I spend 3 to 5 minutes doing that because that activates the lymph to push things out, whether it's in the moment or later in the day going to the bathroom or something. But again, that's just another thing that I've learned that you can add on to something you're already doing to hopefully compound the beneficial impact of it all.
hmm. Yeah. It's like habit stacking, right? Like you're
Well, yeah,
combining several things
yeah,
in one shot to get the most
yeah.
benefit.
That's probably the best way to describe it. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I think if any of you listening, I feel like Brandon has probably graduated to health coach level. Like we should probably just recruit you to actually help serve the other members of our group now. And if any of you have listened to my previous episodes this month, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, she said that. She said that too. And I did not, I promise I did not give him these things to say ahead of time. This is all coming from what Brandon has learned, and not just learned, because I think there's one thing to understand and get knowledge. Listening to this podcast episode, you're getting knowledge, and some of this might be new information to you. But what's more important is that you're integrating, that you're taking action on what's resonating and finding ways to actually fit that into your routine, which I hope is what Brandon has shown to you is possible.
yeah.
Brandon, is there anything else you'd like to add or share before we wrap up?
Looking at my notes here, just the last thing is it's when people ask me like what can I do to whether they just want to lose weight or eat healthier or something like that, like you have to find your why. Like my why is
Mm,
obviously preventing recurrence, but even if it's like just losing weight, you have to find your why has to be big enough to make changes, to make ongoing lasting changes. You can eat
mm,
healthier for a week by not getting fast food or not drinking soda for a couple of weeks or whatever, but if you just revert to the old habits, you're not really, in my mind, like making long-term impact. So
mhm,
find your why And again, everybody's why is going to be different because everybody's story is different. My why is preventing recurrence, but some of the things that I do that I've talked about today is that they're not fun to do. I don't look forward to waking up at 6:30 to go to the sauna to sit there for 30 minutes in 160-degree heat. It's not fun. Like I've never really done a cold plunge, but people sit there for 3 or 4 minutes in 30-degree water, or even I don't even know what the temperature is, but like you have
Hmm.
to find your why, have it be big enough, and make sacrifices if you need to have these changes actually have an impact because otherwise it's not really going to stick, or at least it wasn't for me. And again, people are going to do some of these things, they're going to do more of these things. Like everybody's story is different, so you have to find your why and have it be strong enough so that you can be convicted enough to stay with it
Yeah.
long term.
I think that's such a good point. And in your own, like your own personal story, do you feel like that's what's helped you stick with all of this for so long,
I
for
mean,
five
that's
years?
yeah, because like I mentioned before, the fast, it's not easy for me to do that fast for 5 days because I can
Yeah.
generally eat a pretty good quantity of food, but because in the back of my mind, I know my reason for doing everything,
Yeah.
that when I do that fast 4 times a year, I know that once I'm done for 3 months, and it's kind of like it's funny to say, but it's like a celebration because I can eat again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
Right.
you have to sometimes you have to go through some uncomfortable things sitting in a sauna for 100, that's 150 degrees or whatever for 30 minutes, or sitting in that cold plunge because your immune system's getting stronger, you're eliminating toxins, you'll feel better, all these different reasons. So just
Hmm.
find your why.
Yeah. Yeah. And cancer can absolutely be a strong motivator. That is for sure. If you've gone through a cancer journey or you're currently going through a cancer journey right now, listening to this, then I know you can relate to that. You certainly don't want to do that again. And, anything you can do to help lower that risk can be motivating. So I get that. Brandon,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today and for sharing all that you've learned and implemented over the last 5 years. I hope that our listeners have found that helpful and inspiring and given you some ideas too, given our listeners that some ideas of how you could implement some of the things that Brandon talked about. Perhaps there are some things he listed that just hadn't been on your radar yet. So I hope it gave you guys some good ideas. And as always, if you're enjoying this podcast, please help share it, spread the word so we can get into as many ears as possible. I'd just be so appreciative. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you or having you listen to me again in next week's episode. Bye for now.